A report of arbitrary killings, cases of cruel treatment and violence against journalists have been highlighted as significant human rights issues in Ghana. Now, this according to the latest country report on human rights practices released by the United States Department of State. The report, which also stated that government took steps to address some of these reported abuses by its officials, however, concluded impunity remains a major problem as far as human rights is concerned. Kofi Ejay of our research desk joins me in the studio with more on this. Kofi Ejay, let's first go through what the report talks about as far as abuse against or violence against journalists is concerned. What does it say?
All right, so Ernest, if you should move to the next slide, which talks about abuse of journalists. If you could move to the next slide for me. Okay. So we have, arrests of journalists, and we have, in 2020, this year, so we have Oheneba Boama Benin. He was dragged to the High Court by the Attorney General after he alleged in a Facebook video that President Nana Akufo-Addo had met 8 Supreme Court judges to influence their decision in the 2020 election petition. And now, if you look at what happened to him, you realize that he was charged with contempt of court and then also imprisoned for 14 days plus a fine of 3,000 cedis in addition, Ernest. Okay. So if you should move to the next person, where we have Mensa Thompson. He published on Facebook that a claim alleging that President Akufo-Addo related used the presidential jet on a shopping spree in the United Kingdom. Right. Now let's look at what happened to Mensa Thompson. He was charged
and let's just say Mensa Thompson is not a journalist, but exactly. the assault on journalists was also linked to issues of press freedom.
Absolutely.
Issues of freedom of speech. Yeah.
So he publication of false news was discharged, and then offensive conduct, he was granted bail, a sum of 50,000 Ghana cedis. And we have arrest of Bobi Ansa. He accused the First Lady, Mrs. Rebecca Akufo-Addo, and the Second Lady, Mrs. Samira Bawumia, of giving themselves state lands at the AU building. Now let's look at what's happened to him. He was also charged with publication of false news and offensive conduct, and then he was granted bail of the same thing, 50,000 Ghana cedis, and then case adjourned to March. That was last year, this year. And we've also, if you look at this, we should group all of them together. We have 2 of the cases being false news and offensive conduct. Okay. In terms of contempt of court, we just had 1 case, and if you look at treason, felony, we have 1 case being, Oliver Baka Vomawo.
All right, Kofi, stay with me. We have Suleiman Brahma, who is the Executive Director of the Media Foundation for West Africa, joining us via Zoom with his reaction to this. Mr. Brahma, I'm grateful for your time here on Joy News Prime. These are issues that I'm sure you're very familiar with. Disappointed that, this has found its way in the U.S. State Department report, and of course, its consequences on the image of the country.
Well, certainly this is something that is done every year, and we, of course, knew that the U.S. State Department would issue its annual statement on the state of human rights in our country. And of course, we are all aware of the developments that have happened. Some of us have had cause for concern and have expressed our concern over the year. And well, it's quite a damning report, not good for the image of a country like Ghana that has touted its credentials in terms of human rights, press freedom, media freedom, and all of that. But it's not surprising. I think given the developments that have happened, this report accurately reflects what has been happening over the period.
Seeing the extent at which this has gotten to, what are we hoping? What would you expect government to do as far as these reports are concerned?
Well, I think it is important that the government of the day begins to move away from a state of denial. We report these incidents whenever they happen. The government, through its communications machinery, would always come out to deny and create the impression that those of us who are monitoring and reporting these incidents are deliberately trying to paint the country in a bad light. I think the way to go is to accept that these things are happening. Sometimes these are not sanctioned by government. And I should say quite often, these violations are not sanctioned by government. But when the government often adopts the posture of denying whatever has happened, well, government is not doing that. In fact, to a point where the president himself at some point said that, look, what happened to Ahmed Swaleh shouldn't be considered a press freedom incident. And it took a lot of advocacy to get him to reverse that. And last year, then he started making promises that the Swaleh incident is going to be investigated and so on and so forth. So we need to accept that these things are happening and confront them in dealing with them, because the government of the day has the primary responsibility of securing all of us and making sure that the context within which we work is good and human rights are respected as guaranteed by our constitution.
How would you rate government's commitment to these issues of human rights abuses, especially in our space? I mean, media and press freedom.
Well, I think it's been more of rhetoric. We hear a lot of, interventions by way of words rather than actions. So far, apart from the passage of the Right to Information law and a few interventions here and there, I think that previous governments have had a better record when it comes to, issues of press freedom and free speech. Unfortunately, we have a president that, we all touted his credentials in terms of his positions on human rights and so on and so forth. But I'm sorry to say that President Akufo-Addo, if things continue the way we are seeing, may perhaps end up being the worst in terms of the human rights record. And I'm talking about post-military regime. Even the Rawlings era, as a military, officer who transitioned into a democratically elected leader, I think that there was some sort of evidence to prove that, look, they are living up to the constitutional provisions of freedoms and so on and so forth. President Kufuor's time, yes, things happened, but we saw gradual improvement. President Mills, I think at some point he himself even calls journalists to apologize for incidents that happened. Under Mahama, there were incidents. We took on Standogwe and all of that. But I think that the level of commitment was far better than what we are witnessing today. And like I'm saying, if care is not taken, we may have a very worst case scenario under President Akufo-Addo.
Mr. Brahim, I'm grateful for your time. That's the Executive Director of the Media Foundation for West Africa. And I must say that the report also captured the verbal assault on my own colleague, Erastus Asaridonko. The Asin Central MP Kennedy Japan had said that he should be attacked following the incident that happened in the Ashanti region in Nigeria, his coverage of that riot by the residents there. Now, we still have some more on the report for you. Kofi is still with me in the studio. Kofi, there are issues of unlawful killings that is captured in the report. What are the details?
So you look at number one being the Face the Country movement, where Ibrahim Kaka Mohammed was murdered in Nigeria, in the Ashanti region.
Yeah.
And remember that in the wake of the protests, 2 other people were also shot with respect to this issue. Then the report also captured the 2020 election, where 8 persons were killed during the 2020 elections. And then if I may read this to you, you realize that the report says that 8 killings were associated to the 2020 election, with at least 2 killed by the National Election Security Task Force, and then composed of military and police units. And we also had at least 2 deaths from civilian, violence. And as you also mentioned, there were, cases of David Tamaklo, who was arrested, an online news editor, in April 2021, and then in May, actually, there was a detention of Caleb Kuda, of City FM, and then Kennedy Japan, what you just mentioned, calling for Erastus Asari Donkor.
And I must say that so far we've heard nothing from the police as far as this is concerned, because we made an official complaint. The Privileges Committee also was expected to take up this matter following a report made by the concern raised by Al-Hassan Suhaini. And so far nothing has happened.
And Erastus himself gave an account on Newsnight, and then he is also saying that, you know,
no one has reached out to him.
Exactly. And there were also comments on corruption, that, you know, the Free SHS Secretariat had wasted, misspent over 3.16 million cedis. And then, so that's what the report.
Kofi, thank you very much for always bringing us the details in these reports. Let's